I haven't done this in person since 2019 in the pandemic, so I don't even know how you do this anymore. This is a small room, but still a little bit intimidating. I'll be talking today from zero to app with Bridgetown, the rapid prototyping framework. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you have learned more about Bridgetown. You're curious to build and try it out, build things with it. So let me begin by introducing myself. So my name is Alberto. I'm a staff software engineer at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is a division of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. So yes, I work for the government, and I'm here to help, but for real. And I'm a civic technologies and health IT nerd, and obviously I'm a Ruby enthusiast. So I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so hablo español. So I know you're really looking to hear about Bridgetown, but I'll ask you guys to bear with me. So let me begin with a story. I want to connect the dots so you can see how Bridgetown was super helpful for us and how maybe it can also be a tool you can adopt within your projects. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of a team at the Centers for Medicare. We're working to transform the US healthcare by enabling outcome-driven care and empowering decision makers with the data they need. I guess what does that mean in plain language? So it means that we work with patients, doctors, healthcare organizations, and even health plans, and enable them with the health data they need, right? If it's a patient, you can get access to your data. If you're a doctor or an organization, like a healthcare organization, you can probably access your patient's data, right? And the idea, the whole goal is to improve how healthcare is delivered and coordinated for all of us, right? Through data and analytics. So how do we impact patients? So we've developed an ecosystem of API products. We use a standard called Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, which is the standard we use for sharing data. It allows different systems, especially in healthcare, that are all disconnected to actually integrate. And then we empower patients with their access to their health data, and doctors and organizations and others in the healthcare space, as I mentioned. So I'm going to talk to you today about data at point of care. So this is one of our projects, one of our portfolio products. So for the past few months, since February this year, I've been leading this effort. And data at the point of care, or DPC for short, wants to simplify the way all of us can share and access our medical history, right? The idea is that we connect closer to, the doctor's visit at the doctor's office, and make your data available. I mean, if you're a Medicare patient, of course, this is this product is for Medicare and release. So the idea is that doctors can actually see their patient's data and see what's happening, if this very disconnected and disjointed system. Just to give an example, when the next healthcare emergency happens, the next pandemic, imagine that having access to this data can mean life or death for you, right? So we want to augment healthcare experience for all Medicare patients through health data and analytics. And then we do this through health data and analytics, as I mentioned, right? And basically these APIs. So we're in production. We can do this today. We actually do this with thousands of patients. But then we have a problem, right? So the problem is we have onboarded a few hundreds of organizations at this point, 100 organizations, and we go through this process. But there's a real problem we're going to solve, which is how do we know someone's a doctor or they represent a doctor? How do you know that? How do you know your doctor's legit a doctor, right? It's an honest question. So it is really hard in the United States to figure that out because there's no centralized mechanism. But this is in a diagram, the problem. A doctor comes to us, says hey, I want to access your data, my patient's data. And it's who exactly are you? It's I'm Dr. Jose. It's wait, what? Which Jose? Right? So how do we provide an answer to these questions? So in a nutshell, this is a problem we have. How can we onboard doctors using a digital and secure verification process? So I guess you're wondering, I said this is working, it's in production. We can do this with doctors, but what's stopping us? So I don't know if you have heard this phrase before, do things that don't scale. This phrase it's been coined by Paul Graham, one of the YC Combinator founders. And basically the idea here is that you should probably do things manually to some extent, to test your idea and figure out how to actually solve it, right? And this is the approach we took. The team before me, this is what we did. We prove it's needed. We prove it works. We prove doctors want to get access. But now we don't know how to do this at scale, right? How do we automate the process? So this is a good problem to have, right? Basically, we have product market fit, you could say. So this is why, like, we went to like go down, get in a room, design an amazing system, and look into steps. You probably come up with like something like this, or even more complicated. That's a lot of stuff to build, right? If you want to do like an end-to-end solution. So there's a lot of things still to figure out. As I said, it's an experiment. So what if we test the extremes? What are the risky parts of this process, right? And how do we try that out? So we basically came up with like this minimal viable product, which is like our version of the portal. Basically, it does the extremes, which is like, can you create a user account, register as a doctor, and then if those two things are true, we give you access to this API and the data. So, there's a few questions we need to answer. Is this a real human when a user account comes in? Are you really a doctor? Are you really a good doctor? By that I mean, are you a doctor that's not committing like, malpractice or something that should not be engaging with patients? So we got the team. It's like, perfect, let's do it. Let's build it. So we got like all our tools, as you usually do for software development, Sketch, Figma, Mural, all the things, right? And we ended up here. It's like we figure out there's like different systems we could use. This is a complicated domain. We're using something called login.gov. We're going to use that, which is a Ruby on Rails application, by the way. It's a plug here for that team. Great team at the General Services Administration. This is like Auth0, but like run by the government. Kind of cool. And then basically, like they have like all these designs and all these APIs and OpenID Connect and all these standards that we need to use, right? And then here we have on my side, like my team of engineers, designers, product people, like trying to put it all together in an experience that doesn't really suck. So there's a lot to figure out, a lot of prototyping. We ended up like in this messy space of like, oh, that screen should not be there because actually when you look into the OpenID Connect standard, this is what you get as a response. What if you verify someone's identity and it fails? And you need to like explain to, it needs to be understandable by designers, engineers, and everyone, what the return, like the thing that an API returns, what does it translate in terms of like your user experience? So all to say, designing is hard, right? And I don't mean design as the act of using Figma or Sketch. I mean design as, the creative act of building systems that depend on other systems, right? That have like all these inputs and outputs and dependencies. Especially when you're designing systems that, have policies and regulation and a bunch of other constraints that affect those inputs and outputs of your solution, right? This is an image from Jessica Kerr on Symanthy. She gave a wonderful keynote at RubyConf 2019. I encourage all of you to watch it. It's really cool and fun. So, I guess this creative act of designing, right? For me, I think this phrase resonates with me about what that process looks like. And this is from Brett Victor. He's a former Apple engineer. I think his title was like Human Interface Inventor. He gave this talk many years ago, Inventing on Principle. And he talks about like the act of designing software and creating interfaces. And he said this, he said like creators need an immediate connection with what they create. You need to build and play with the ideas through this act of creating and like seeing them. And that's how like new ideas emerge and new ideas evolve. So if this resonates for you, as it did for me, it's probably because, code is my medium. I cannot Figma well. I cannot do Figma well, there's a lot of benefit from those tools. I think they have a place, but for me, it is not really the right tool to express these ideas. I ended up like putting together like ERB templates, like a static website generator to like come up with designs and bring this to the conversation of my team. So if you're like me, right, that code is your medium, then I introduce you to Bridgetown. We made it here. So hello, Rocky Mountain Ruby. So this is like your default website. I mean, I customize it. It says hello to you all. Wonderful people. But this is like, Bridgetown, I guess we were talking last night at the speakers meeting, and it came up a couple times, like the Rocky Mountain Ruby website, it's a Bridgetown website, right? And we probably know, I mean, does anybody in here have you heard about Bridgetown before? A few hands, not many. Have you heard about Jekyll? Yes, okay. So anyway, the Rocky Mountain Ruby website is actually a Bridgetown site. That is true. But I think Bridgetown, is the underdog of one of the underdogs in the ecosystem, right? I think all of us may think that it is just yet another static website generator, right? Which it is, but there's a lot more hidden behind it. This is the Bridgetown website, which you can access at bridgetownrb.com. This is like the Edge version because this team is actually testing. They're like on beta 2 of what's going to be Bridgetown 2.0. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening there. And as I said, maybe you know Bridgetown or you have heard about it as yet another static site generator. However, as you can read here, like there's a lot more to that than that, right? It says it's a next generation progressive site generator and full stack framework powered by Ruby. And it has like amazing like tools and ingredients inside. So as you can see, the words static site are actually absent from this description, right? It is really not there. So let me tell you a little bit about Bridgetown. So it was created by Jared White in early 2020. It started as a fork of Jekyll, right? The battle-tested static site generator we'll know. It switched the built-in web server inside to use Rack, Puma, and Roda on top of it some time ago. And then it started innovating on top of it. So it follows the convention over configuration principle. All of us that have worked with Rails, we know this concept, right? And this idea that when frameworks aim to minimize the amount of decisions we need to make as developers, we can become more productive, right? It's not that we don't make decisions and the framework makes the decisions for us, is that we can actually invest our time on the right decisions that we should be making, right? Hopefully the decisions on the project and the problem and the domain we're working on, right? And not like, getting lost into a maze of gems and other things, right? As I said, it's great for static content generation. And then it follows the Jamstack framework, which is basically JavaScript, APIs, and markup, right? But it takes it to the next level on what they call the Dream Stack, which is a funny name. And it stands for Delightful Ruby Expressing APIs and Markup, right? And basically, in simple words, it allows Bridgetown to bring interactivity to an application, right? To your old static site using Roda. So this is, just to take a look at it real quick, right? This is like, has a CLI, has many other tools. It's wrapped nicely around that. You can create a project. I realize I have a typo at the bottom. I missed the Bridgetown start command, copy pasting, but you basically install the gem. I'm using like the 2.0 beta 2 gem here, which has some new features. You basically create a new site running Bridgetown my website or however you want to call your project. You get into your project, right, and you run bin /Bridgetown start, and it starts up. Has that like Rocky Mountain Ruby-like template that you saw earlier. And then, I guess just to connect the dots from like static site generation, you probably know this, you've done this probably many times before. It can do the same things you can do with Jekyll. You can create a page out of Markdown website file, right? It has this like upper portion called front matter. You can add like variables and things there. And then under it, you have like, in this case, Markdown written text. It gets converted to like HTML, right? So out of the box, it gives you most of the things Jekyll gives you already. Like has pages, posts, front matter, collections, data files, layouts, static files. I don't go into those because probably you know those or have played with them. But Bridgetown brings new stuff, like it supports multiple template agents kind of on a more like easy built-in way. So you can use like ERB, Serbia, and others, has like plugins that can extend it. It brings this concept of automations, which is like a nice way to basically like integrate libraries or do things within your project using Ruby. Has like a nice plugin system. And there's like many plugins from like bringing Turbo to using SQLite and doing other things on top of your project. I think it leverages, this is not a mentioned feature on the website, but I put it here because it allows to use pure Ruby files to represent data, resources, and other things. So it has a very nice way of like embracing Ruby at its core. It has an opinionated take on web components and hydration. There's a lot of cool stuff. I won't be talking about it today, but like that you can see Jared and others have like recorded videos and demo it, and lots more. So it comes with a bunch of features and things. But there's more than meets the eye. I guess you may have seen this meme of like 3 raccoons and a trench coat, right? So like inside that content site generator trench coat, right? And maybe that's all we see, all we know. There's a lot of stuff hidden inside, right? First, you have like Rack, the Ruby web server interface, right? The thing that allows Rails and many of the frameworks to exist. On top of it, as I mentioned, it has Puma, the fast concurrent web server for Ruby and Rack, which is like production tested, right? Like all of us probably use this. And finally, you have Roda, which makes it so easy to develop applications. Has anyone here, raise of hands again, it's like, have you heard about Roda? A few hands. Have you heard about Sinatra? A lot more hands, everyone, okay. So Roda was created by Jeremy Evans, and it aims to be a simple and productive framework for building applications. So basically, it gives you a DSL. It's kind of similar to, has a Sinatra-esque look and feel and usage. It's very similar. It feels like that. And it gives you this DSL to define what's called a routing tree, and you can use that to model your API or your application, right? This is a sample Roda app. Basically, this is like a config.rockup RU file. As a sample, this is like one of the very basic examples from their website. You basically require Roda. You then create this class app, which extends the class Roda. And that gives you like a lot of magic and superpowers, right? It brings this DSL that you can use to basically create this block. And within this block, you model your resources, your endpoints, your kind of like your controller, right? In this example, for example, if you go to like the root of this project, of this web address, right? If you were running it and you go to the root, it will like redirect you to /hello. And then it defines /hello, right? It has a nice verbose way to do this. And within this hello routing tree, you then can have /world, right? And it responds like hello world. Or it just responds hello if you just go /hello, right? So this is very basic, just to give you an example of what Roda looks like. So if you have used Sinatra before, this may like kind of look familiar. And then you run it, right? At the bottom, you have like run app freeze app. Basically, you like start up this Rack application and comes to life. So Roda comes with batteries. And by that, what I mean is that Roda has a ton of plugins and things that are available out of the box, plus the things that the community have developed throughout the years. This is like the top, where like the plugin section starts on their documentation. It continues for a few screens down because it has like so many plugins and other libraries. And basically, if it's making sense to you right now, if Jekyll and Rhoda had a baby, it's Bridgetown, right? This is kind of like what you're getting out of it, not just a static site generator. It has like the genes of both, if it makes sense, right? You can definitely do great static site generation and have like an amazing website like the Rocky Mountain Ruby, or you can actually start doing interactive things. So let's look at that, like the cool stuff. So server-side rendering. So this is a quote from the Bridgetown website. I'm going to read it. It says, like, server-side rendering, known as SSR, has made its peace with static site generation. And we're increasingly seeing a hybrid architecture emerge in tooling throughout the web industry. So this is what they're doing with within Bridgetown, with Roda and all the other things that I mentioned. So one of the first cool things that Roda gives you, it's called server-rendered routes. And basically, remember that example from Roda that I showed you earlier? It's like you can bring that into your Bridgetown project, right? So Bridgetown lets you create your own Roda-based API routes. So if you go, when you create your project, if you go to the server/routes directory there, Again, convention over configuration. This is the way they have approached this. There, you can create your Ruby file, in this case, like preview.rb. And there, you create this like class, right? Very similar to the Roda example we saw, where you can basically define a normal API endpoint as you would do with Roda. You need to use this naming convention, routes, column, in this case, preview, which is the file name. And then you extend the Bridgetown rack routes class, and that gives you all the routes capabilities inside your Bridgetown project in this specific route. And then you define it with the same like DSL and code snippet, route do R here on /preview, right? You do the thing. Here, like this example, I'm not gonna get into it, but it's just using other Bridgetown capabilities, right? About how content is generated and the files that it is producing. But you can do technically anything here. You can like check a database, hit an API. Anything you can do on a normal like application, Rails application or anything else through your controller, like you can also have that logic here. Wait, there's more. So this is one of the coolest things that Bridgetown gives you that I really like. This is like kind of very, very neat. So it's called file-based dynamic routes. And so Bridgetown gives you the ability to write what's called file-based dynamic routes, which basically allows you to integrate. Imagine having an ERB file where you can integrate like the Roda definition with the view template in a single file, right? And then you put these files within a specific location within your project, and suddenly you have like this like different like layers of controllers and vendors and stuff like happening in your application. So there's these two sections that I mentioned. At the top, you'll see in a second like a Roda block section at the top, right? That has some special delimiter. And then underneath, you'll find like the normal like ERB template that can use an access, right? And can be manipulated by the Roda block. So let me show you like with an example. Here you have. So you see this -- minus %. So this is like the delimiter they came up with. So this is an ERB file, in this case, items.erb. And then within this ERB file, this top portion, it's like this Roda definition that you add at it. Kind of similar like the front matter concept, right? But for actual like Roda logic, which is kind of cool. And then you define this. And you will see that you have this render width method here, like a part of a DSL that it gives you. And basically, that's what you use to inject the front matter or anything else, right, within the renderer for your ERB file in this case. And then underneath, you just like do a normal ERB file as you would do, right? And in this case, it's like iterating through this list, right? So you can see that items is available to the ERB view, and then it just lists the elements, right? So this is very simple, just to give you a sense like what it will take to like print out a list of elements. But like, again, you can do a lot of other like more interactive designs with it. And last, it has something new that's called callable objects. Basically, this is a Bridgetown 2.0 feature, so it's not available in Bridgetown 1. So it's like only available on the beta version. And basically, it gives you like the ability to have like a Roda callable, like have a callable object that within your Roda block you can call. So let me show you an example. So here you have this upper class, my RSS feed. This is like, how can I create an RSS feed, right, in an easy way for, let's say, for your website. So to keep it in that context. So you create this class called my RSS feed. You include Bridgetown Roda callable, which is like a module they make available. And then you define this def call method. It has the app object available. And then you can access requests, response, and many other things within the Rax framework and Roda. And then in this example, it says like, is an exercise left to the reader. Imagine you have a method that goes to a database or parses out, a list of elements you want to render as an RSS feed. And then you put that into the feed XML variable, which is going to be an XML in this case because of the way RSS works. And then you have a Roda snippet, right, below in your, if you remember those initial server-side render routes that I showed you, you can have there a route that's rendered that has this, when you do rget to my feed, my -feed.xml, it just calls that class, my RSS feed.rnew, right? And it calls the call method immediately, and then it gives you that output. So this is a composition model, method here that's pretty nice. So I'm looking forward to all the things you could probably do with this within Bridgetown in the future. I haven't played with it too much. But anyway, bringing it all together. So this is what I'm calling the Bridgetown way. I don't know that they use that term, but this is my opinion about it. So again, this is like the file structure, right, of what a Roda project would look like. But this is more than just a file structure, right? This is like how convention over configuration looks for Bridgetown. So you have like a config folder, you have like this front-end folder where you can like create components and do some cool things. You have this server folder where you can create these routes that I mentioned, right? And create them as individual Ruby files. Because this is using Roda, I didn't talk about it before, but like you can create your own like custom Roda plugins within your project and just like inject them to the Roda application. So you can like use everything that exists, plus you can even implement your own. And then within the source directory, you have like components, you have data, which is very similar to Jekyll, your layouts, the traditional posts for like pages and stuff that gets automatically generated. And then you have this _routes folder that basically allows you to use this like file-based Roda composition method that I show you. And then output, which is like where all the output of the static site is generated, and all the other configuration files for Ruby, ESBuild, and everything else. So I guess the Bridgetown advantage, I would describe it as like, it's a static site generator on steroids. It's powered by Roda, which gives you the server render routes. It has these file-based dynamic routes. It now includes these callable objects for Roda. And then you can leverage the existing Roda plugins, the new Bridgetown's plugins, and many more enhancements, right? And everything's wrapped up in a nice command line interface with a healthy dose of convention. So coming back to the story, right? Because I was talking about prototyping, talked to you about healthcare. I took this detour in Bridgetown, and where do we go now? So we built a thing. So I mentioned this DPC project, right? So you remember those like different screens with designs and workflows and all those mappings. So using Bridgetown, right, and a lot of like file-based Roda renders, like we basically built this application. This started like as a static website, just to convey some of the design decisions that we wanted to discuss. And then as I started playing with Bridgetown, I started like wiring it up, right? And then I actually connected this to like the login.gov sandbox, and I was able to use like their identity verification in sandbox mode and test it out. And we were able to like prototype and test and like see firsthand how the experience evolved, like as you go through all the different journeys, right? So I'm gonna like, for the sake of time, I'm gonna like fast forward this. Let me see, I need to look over here. It does all the identity verification, and then it takes you back. Oh no, mouse. Takes you back to here. You're coming back to our app, and this is where we're checking like, are you a doctor? Did you verify your identity? We hit our internal APIs, which we mock up using also like this Roda-powered capabilities within Bridgetown. And then we were able to like map the interface and actually wire it in many ways to like the real sandbox APIs when they were available. So I found like Roda to be super helpful and pretty quick to prototype with these ideas and build it. So I guess the elephant in the room is maybe you're wondering like, but did you build an app with Bridgetown, right? Which I spoke with some of you last night about this too, right? And we were debating this. So not exactly. We built a prototype with Bridgetown, right? But this is a more complicated decision, right? We already manage another Rails application. We like have other systems that could be Rails application, one could argue. So we know that Rails is a framework that works. We are building a team towards around that. And so it makes sense to still use Rails, right? For like all the things that we're doing and the things that we have, right? But I think there's a place to explore like what can all of us do with Roda or even with Bridgetown. So Bridgetown allows us to prototype ideas using code and HTML as the medium. We were able to start with static design, which can then be wired up and made interactive and like really interact with other APIs. It allowed us to test ideas and understand the problem our team was working on, right? Like this domain. And then we were able to build a functional prototype application using the power of Roda within Bridgetown. So, I mean, all to say that product development is a creative team activity, which requires like sharing ideas, criticizing, and evolving them. Has anyone seen this picture before? No hands. One hand, two hands there. So this is a picture of Teen Toy. This is one of the very early CGI pictures, short films that was ever created. It was created by Pixar in 1988. Is it a pretty baby? Not too pretty, right? So Ed Catmull, one of the Pixar founders, has this idea of like ugly babies. And he says ideas are like ugly babies, right? If we look at this image and we say like, oh man, that baby's ugly, right? So like probably Pixar would have stopped innovating under technologies and ideas, and like all the movies and things they have developed and produced afterwards, like we have never seen them, right? So like judging this effort because it was an ugly idea was like pretty incorrect take on it, right? Which they didn't do. They knew this very well. And Ed Catmull says that ideas are like ugly babies, right? They're fragile like a baby. When we're born, we don't look super pretty at all. We're like all swollen and stuff, right? And we all grow and evolve, right, to the wonderful humans we're here. And ideas should not just be judged by how they look at the early stages. So I think this is true, right? And I don't know if you have heard this idea also, plan to build everything twice. When I was first introduced to this idea, it was attributed to the mythical man month. So my take is that if we assume this is true for a second, right? I think that prototyping the risky and difficult parts of your application is a more cost-effective way of building some things twice, right? Where you test it out early, you ditch it, and it helps you form the right abstractions and like know what are the trade-offs you're making at this particular stage and better understand things. So can I use Bridgetown to build a serious application? So I have a bestseller for you all from O'Reilly. It depends. So, I mean, as every other answer in tech, you know, my answer is like, it depends. I think there's two important questions to ask ourselves. Would anyone question whether Jekyll is battle tested? I don't think anyone would question that. We use that at scale, right? Everywhere. Go to GitHub pages, Netlify, all those things. Can you build a robust application just using Roda? Yes, you can. There's many people that have done that. You know, Jeremy Evans has talked about this for a long time. So I think if the answer to these two questions is yes. So I think, yes, you can. The question is, you know, what is the right decision for your team, for your domain, for your problem, for what you're doing? I think there's a realm of applications, small, medium, I don't know if large too, that probably can be built using Bridgetown, leveraging all the Roda capabilities it has. Maybe those small apps can grow and be bigger than we can imagine today. So to me, Bridgetown is an example of the power of Ruby, right? I love Ruby. It's like this backpack that goes with me all the time, everywhere, and provides me with amazing tools that I can experiment and play with everywhere I go, right? So we need more frameworks. We need to, you know, test out more things. This is what's going to make this community more vibrant and evolve. And this is what Ruby does great, which is making developers, all of us, all of you, happy wherever that you can be the happiest, right? Whatever that framework is. So wrapping up, stay tuned. You can go to dpc.cms.gov. This is like a legit government website. This is our project. So if you're curious about it, you can go and learn about it. We're very busy. The team's very busy as I'm here speaking about this. Wrapping up our implementation and development. So we're looking forward to launch next year after Christmas. And then if you're a Medicare enrollee or have family members that are in Medicare, so talk to them and their doctors about data from care and the things they could be doing. So anyway, thank you. And that's a wrap.